The evening started out full of excitement. The city lights were glowing softly through the restaurant windows, and the warm smell of roasted food mixed with the faint sweetness of dessert in the air. She had spent the whole day smiling, thinking about this dinner. It wasn't just any night. It was meant to be a celebration of something she had worked hard for, a promotion she never thought she would get. After years of long hours and endless effort, she had finally been recognized. Tonight was supposed to feel special. Her husband had promised that he would take her somewhere nice, just the two of us, he had said that morning before leaving for work. That small promise had made her heart light up. They hadn't had much time together lately, and she missed those little moments when they used to talk and laugh without thinking about bills, deadlines, or who was more tired. She had even picked out a simple but elegant dress, one that made her feel confident but not flashy. She wanted to feel like herself, relaxed and happy. When they walked into the restaurant, the waiter greeted them with a smile and led them to a quiet table near the window. The lighting was soft, the kind that made everything feel calm. The music was gentle, almost like a lullaby mixed with old jazz. For a while, everything felt right. They ordered their meals, joked about how fancy the menu sounded, and shared a few memories about their early days together. She remembered how he used to look at her with that easy, playful smile, like she was the most interesting person in the room. For a few moments that night, she saw a glimpse of that old version of him again. It gave her hope. Their food came and they talked between bites. She told him stories from work, how nervous she'd been during the meeting when her boss announced the promotion, how her coworkers had cheered for her afterward, and how she wanted to do something meaningful with her new role. He nodded and smiled at the right moments, but there was something a little distant in his eyes. She didn't think much of it at first. People had off days. When the waiter brought out the dessert, a small chocolate cake with a single candle on top, she laughed in surprise. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her face lighting up. He shrugged with a grin. "It's not every day you get a big promotion. You deserve something sweet." She smiled, touched by the gesture. For a moment she felt loved, seen, and proud. The candlelight flickered softly between them, and she thought maybe this was the kind of night that could bring them closer again. But then, something small, something that shouldn't have mattered, changed the mood completely. When the waiter came back with the bill, he placed it neatly between them, right in the center of the table. Her husband didn't reach for it. He just glanced at it and then looked at her. There was a brief silence, the kind that feels heavier than it should. She gave a little laugh, assuming he hadn't noticed. "You want me to get it?" she asked lightly. He leaned back in his chair. "Well, it's your big night," he said. His tone wasn't sharp, but there was an edge to it. She blinked, a little confused. "I thought you said you were taking me out to celebrate." "I did," he replied, his smile fading. "But you're the one who just got the promotion. You're earning more now. I figured it'd make sense for you to cover dinner." His words stung a little, not because of the money, but because of what they meant. She wasn't expecting him to pay because she couldn't. She wanted him to pay because it was a small act of care, a way to say, "I'm proud of you." She tried to keep her voice calm. "It's not about the money," she said softly. "It's just that you said you were treating me. That's all." He sighed and crossed his arms. "You know, you're always talking about being independent and strong. I thought this would be easy for you. What's the big deal?" The air around them changed. The easy laughter from earlier disappeared. The music in the background suddenly felt too loud. She could sense people nearby trying not to look but still glancing their way. Her face grew warm with embarrassment. She wanted to explain, to tell him that she didn't mind paying, but the tone he used made her feel small, like she had done something wrong for expecting kindness. Still, she reached for her purse, hoping to smooth things over. "Don't worry about it," she said quietly. "I'll take care of it." But the way he looked at her, almost as if he'd won something, made her stomach twist. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "That's what I thought," he said. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her purse. She wasn't angry yet. She was just disappointed. This was supposed to be their night, their moment. It was supposed to feel warm, not cold. She pulled out her card, but before she could place it on the table, the waiter returned with a smile, ready to collect the payment. "Everything all right here?" he asked politely. Her husband gave a quick laugh. "Yeah, we're just having a little discussion about who gets the honor of paying," he said. the word honor dripping with sarcasm. The waiter chuckled awkwardly and stepped back. Sensing the tension, she tried to lighten the mood again. "Let's not make this a big thing," she said, her voice gentle but strained. "It's just dinner." But he didn't let it go. "That's exactly the point," he said. "It's just dinner. You should be happy to cover it. You've been telling everyone at work how independent you are." Now, his tone wasn't teasing, it was sharp, defensive, as if her success had become something he needed to compete with. She looked down, her throat tightening. She had never wanted to make him feel small or insecure. She just wanted to celebrate something good together. But now everything felt wrong. The silence stretched too long. She could hear the clinking of glasses, the faint sound of laughter from another table, but here at theirs there was only tension. Finally, she set her card down and said quietly, "Let's just end this, okay?" The waiter came back, picked up the bill, and walked away. She tried to take a deep breath to calm her racing thoughts. She told herself it wasn't worth it to argue. Maybe he was tired. Maybe something else was bothering him. She didn't want to ruin the whole night over a bill. But when the dessert plate was brought back with a small leftover piece of cake, he didn't say a word. He just stared at it, tapping his finger against the table. She looked at him, searching his face for some sign that he wanted to make peace. Instead, he muttered, "You really embarrassed me tonight." Her eyes widened. "Embarrassed you? How?" He shrugged, his jaw tight. "You made it seem like I can't pay. Everyone saw that." She shook her head slowly. "That's not what happened. You made it about that. I just didn't want to argue." For a second it seemed like he might calm down, but then he looked away, his pride louder than his reason. He picked up his fork and started slicing the cake without saying a word. The movement was sharp, quick, frustrated. She watched him quietly, her heart heavy. She wanted to reach across the table, to say something that would fix it, but nothing came. She could feel the sting of tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. The waiter came back once more, offering to pack the rest of the dessert, but neither of them answered. The air was thick with awkward silence. Finally, she stood up. "I'm going to wait by the door," she said softly. He looked up, his face unreadable. She turned away before he could respond, walking slowly through the restaurant. Each step felt heavier than the last. She could feel the eyes of other diners following her, though no one said anything. Outside, the night air hit her like a wave of relief. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the lights flickering across the street. The evening that had started with laughter and love had ended in quiet disappointment. She thought about how fragile happiness could be, how something as small as a misunderstanding could unravel an entire night. She told herself she wouldn't cry, not tonight. She had cried too many times before. When he finally walked out, he didn't say much. They stood there for a moment, side by side but miles apart. And as they walked to the car, the silence between them said more than words ever could. The ride home that night felt endless. The car moved through the quiet streets, but neither of them said a word. The city lights flashed across their faces, creating brief moments of brightness that vanished as quickly as they came. She sat by the window, looking out, pretending to be interested in the blur of buildings and headlights. In truth, her mind was replaying everything that had just happened at the restaurant. She wanted to understand why such a small misunderstanding had turned into such a cold silence. The night had started beautifully. Laughter, warmth, even that sweet little cake. And now all of it had been buried under a few angry words and wounded pride. She sighed softly and glanced at him. His hands were tight on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He looked angry, but beneath that anger she could see something else. Maybe guilt, maybe confusion. When they finally reached home, he parked the car and sat for a moment without turning off the engine. The faint hum of the car filled the silence between them. She waited, hoping he would say something, anything to break the tension. But he didn't. She unbuckled her seatbelt and said quietly, "I'm going inside." He nodded once, not looking at her. She stepped out, the night air cool against her skin. The soft chirping of crickets filled the quiet neighborhood. She walked up to the front door and unlocked it slowly. Inside, the house felt unusually empty. The faint smell of air freshener lingered, mixed with the scent of their dog's fur from the couch. Everything was familiar, yet nothing felt the same. She hung her purse on the hook by the door, took off her shoes, and went straight to the kitchen to get some water. Her throat felt dry, like all the air had been sucked out of her. She leaned against the counter and closed her eyes for a second. She heard the door close behind her. He came in a few moments later. The sound of his shoes on the floor was heavy, slow. She didn't turn around at first. She didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to talk, to fix things right away, but another part of her needed space, to breathe, to think. He spoke first. "So are you just going to ignore me now?" His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a sharp edge. She turned to face him slowly. "I'm not ignoring you, I just don't know what to say right now." He crossed his arms. "You made me look bad back there." She frowned, confused. "Made you look bad? All I did was ask if you wanted me to pay. You're the one who turned it into a fight." He looked away, shaking his head. "You don't get it." "Then explain it," she said softly, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm listening," he hesitated. "Everyone was looking at us. You embarrassed me. It's like you were testing me in front of people." Her heart sank. "Testing you? I would never do that." He rubbed the back of his neck, frustration building in his face. "You've been acting different lately. Ever since you got that promotion, it's like you don't need me anymore." The words hit her like a quiet punch. That wasn't true, not even close. Everything she had done, every bit of effort at work she had done for them, for their future. She took a small step closer. "I still need you," she said softly. "I've always needed you. But this isn't about who needs who. It's about being there for each other." He didn't respond. His silence was louder than any argument. She swallowed hard, her chest tight. "You could have just said you were upset. We could have talked about it instead of turning it into a scene." He finally looked at her, his eyes tired. "I know," he said quietly. I don't know what came over me." There was a long pause. For a brief moment, she thought maybe this was the beginning of understanding. Maybe they could talk it through. But before she could speak, he sighed and walked toward the living room, muttering something under his breath that she couldn't make out. She stayed in the kitchen for a while, staring at the glass of water in her hands. Her thoughts were messy, tangled between anger and sadness. She didn't want to fight, but she also couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. A few minutes later, she walked into the living room. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his expression distant. On the coffee table in front of him sat a small box from the restaurant, the leftover piece of cake they hadn't finished. She stared at it for a moment, feeling a mix of emotions. That cake had started as a symbol of celebration. Now it just reminded her of how quickly things could change. She sat down at the other end of the couch. "Can we talk about this?" she asked gently. He didn't look up. "What's there to talk about?" "You're mad, I'm mad. It happens," she sighed. "It's not just about being mad. It's about what it means. You hurt me tonight. Not because of the money, but because of how you spoke to me." He finally set his phone down and looked at her. "I already said I didn't mean it like that." "I know," she said quietly. "But words still hurt even when we don't mean them." The room fell silent again. The ticking of the wall clock seemed louder than usual. She thought about their past, the good days, the laughter, the late-night talks. How did they get here? When did things start feeling so distant? After a long pause, he leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "I've just been stressed, okay? Work's been a mess. Everything's piling up. And then I see you doing so well, and I don't know. I guess I felt left behind." There it was. The truth she had sensed but hadn't wanted to face. His pride had been hurt, not by her success, but by his own insecurities. She took a deep breath. "You're not behind," she said softly. "We're supposed to be on the same side. What's mine is ours." He nodded slowly, not meeting her eyes. "I know that, I messed up." Her heart softened a little. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that this would be a turning point, that they could learn from it. "I don't want us to fight like this anymore," she said quietly. "We used to lift each other up. I miss that." He looked at her for a moment, and something in his expression shifted. The anger faded a little, replaced by guilt. "I miss it too," he said finally. She smiled faintly, though her eyes still looked sad. "Then let's find it again." He nodded, and for a while neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't as heavy as before, but it still carried all the unspoken things between them. After a few minutes, she stood up. "I'm going to shower and get ready for bed," she said softly. He didn't stop her. He just sat there, staring at the small box of cake on the table. In the bathroom, she let the warm water run over her hands before washing her face. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed tired of holding things together, tired of walking on eggshells around someone she loved. She whispered to herself, "It'll get better." She wanted to believe it. She had to. When she came out, he was still on the couch, scrolling through his phone again. She didn't say anything. She just turned off the light in the hallway and went to bed. Lying there in the dark, she thought about everything, about how small moments could carry so much weight. She thought about how love could shift, how pride could steal the softness out of it. Eventually, she drifted to sleep, her heart heavy but still holding a small spark of hope that tomorrow might be different. In the middle of the night, she woke up to the sound of footsteps. He had finally come to bed. She felt the mattress sink slightly as he lay down beside her. For a moment, he hesitated, then placed his hand gently on hers. She didn't move, but she didn't pull away either. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. A quiet reminder that even after the worst nights, there could still be space for understanding. The moonlight slipped through the curtains, lighting their faces just enough to show that both of them were still awake. Lying there in silence, unsure of what the next day would bring, neither of them spoke. But somewhere between that silence and the soft rhythm of their breathing, something fragile remained. A chance, however small, to start over. The next morning started quietly. The house was still, filled only with the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old wall clock in the living room. The sunlight crept gently through the curtains, landing on her face as she slowly opened her eyes. For a few seconds, she didn't remember everything that had happened the night before, but then like a slow wave it came back, the argument, the silence, and the uneasy way they had fallen asleep. She turned her head slightly. He was still beside her, lying on his side, facing away. His breathing was slow and steady, almost peaceful. She watched him for a moment, wondering what was going through his mind. Did he regret the things he said? Did he even realize how deeply his words had hurt her? She didn't know. She quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake him. In the kitchen, she started making coffee, the soft smell filling the room. Mornings had always been her favorite time of day, calm, fresh, full of quiet hope. But that morning, even the sunlight couldn't lift the weight in her chest. She stood by the counter, staring at the steam rising from the coffee pot. She wanted things to be normal again, to go back to the easy comfort they used to have. But something inside her told her that things wouldn't be the same until they both changed. After a while, he came into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He looked tired, his hair messy, his expression unreadable. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied, her voice calm but distant. He sat down at the table while she poured 2 cups of coffee. For a minute, neither of them spoke. It wasn't angry silence this time, just the kind that comes when 2 people are unsure how to start. Finally, he cleared his throat. "About last night," he began. She looked at him, waiting. He sighed. "I shouldn't have said what I said. I was out of line." She didn't respond right away. She took a sip of her coffee, then said quietly, "Thank you for saying that." "I didn't mean to ruin your night," he continued. "You worked hard for that promotion. You deserved a nice evening." She nodded slowly. "I just wanted to celebrate with you, that's all. It wasn't about who paid or who earned more. It was about us." He looked down, guilt flickering across his face. "I know. I messed up." Her heart softened a little, but she stayed quiet. She didn't want to rush forgiveness, not because she wanted to punish him, but because she needed him to understand the depth of what had happened. After a while, he said, "Can we start over? Maybe go out again tonight? I treat this time, I promise." She gave a small smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let's see how the day goes," she said. He nodded, understanding her hesitation. They spent the rest of the morning in quiet conversation, talking about small things, the groceries they needed, plans for the weekend, things around the house. It wasn't completely comfortable, but it was better than the night before. Later that afternoon, she met up with her friend at a small cafe nearby. Her friend listened quietly as she explained what had happened. "You handled it with so much grace," her friend said, shaking her head. "I don't think I could have stayed that calm." She smiled faintly. "It wasn't easy. but yelling wouldn't have helped. Sometimes silence says more. Her friend nodded. Still, you deserve respect. Don't forget that. I know, she said softly, stirring her tea. I just hope he realizes that too. They talked for a while longer, and by the time she headed home, she felt a little lighter. Talking about it out loud helped her sort through her feelings. She wasn't angry anymore, just sad that things had gone so wrong over something so small. When she got back home, the house smelled like food. She walked into the kitchen and saw him standing by the stove cooking dinner. He turned when he heard her. Hey, he said a little nervously. I thought I'd make us something nice tonight. She smiled a little. That's thoughtful of you. He nodded, looking relieved that she didn't sound upset. They ate together at the table, nothing fancy, just homemade pasta and salad, but it felt warmer than the restaurant dinner had. Halfway through the meal, he looked up and said quietly, I've been thinking a lot today, about how I acted. She met his eyes, waiting for him to continue. I don't know why I let my pride get in the way. You've always supported me, and I should have been proud of you instead of feeling small. She nodded. I get it. Sometimes when one person starts doing better, it makes the other feel like they're falling behind. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're supposed to lift each other up. He smiled sadly. You're right. I guess I just needed to hear it. She reached across the table and touched his hand. We both make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm really sorry. For the first time in days, she felt a genuine sense of peace. Maybe they really could move forward. After dinner, they watched a movie together. It wasn't perfect. There were still small silences, still moments when their eyes met and then looked away. But it was better. It was progress. Later that night, as they were cleaning up, he laughed softly. You know, I still can't believe how calm you were at that restaurant. Anyone else would have lost it, she smiled faintly. What good would that have done? I figured someone had to stay calm. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. You're stronger than I give you credit for. It's not about strength, she said. It's about choice. I could have shouted or made a scene, but that wouldn't have solved anything. Sometimes silence can teach more than words. He looked at her quietly, realizing how much he had underestimated her composure. You really amazed me, you know, he said. I didn't expect that reaction from you. She laughed softly. I didn't expect it either. I just didn't want to be someone I'd regret being later. They stood there for a moment, the tension between them replaced by something gentler. That night, as she got ready for bed, she thought about how quickly things could change, how one act of patience could turn anger into reflection. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a while she felt hopeful. A few days passed and life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. They talked more, shared more, and even started going on walks together after dinner. Each day he seemed to understand a little better what she needed. Not grand gestures or fancy promises, but respect, kindness, and partnership. One evening, while they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to her and said, You know, I've been thinking about something. That night at the restaurant, I wish I could take it back. But I guess if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have realized how much I was taking you for granted. She smiled softly. Sometimes we need a hard moment to see what really matters. He nodded, his eyes full of quiet regret but also gratitude. I'm just glad you didn't give up on me. I thought about it, she admitted with a small laugh. But then I remembered all the good times, and I realized one mistake doesn't erase everything. He looked at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. You're something else, he said. Honestly, your reaction that night, it made me want to be better. She tilted her head, curious. Better how? Better for you, he said simply. More patient, more understanding, more grateful. She smiled and reached for his hand. That's all I ever wanted. They sat there quietly for a while, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The world around them felt calm, as if the universe itself was giving them another chance. Later that night, as they got ready to sleep, he turned to her and said softly, You know, I was wrong about what strength looks like. It's not in being loud or proving a point. It's in staying calm when everything inside you wants to explode. She smiled gently. Sometimes silence is stronger than shouting. He nodded. I learned that from you. As they turned off the lights, she felt a quiet sense of peace wash over her. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a single moment. Maybe it was a process, built slowly with patience and effort. That night, as they drifted to sleep, she realized something important. Sometimes love isn't about avoiding fights or pretending everything is perfect. It's about what you do after the mistakes, how you rebuild, how you choose to show up again with open hearts. And as the room grew dark and quiet, she knew one thing for sure. Her calmness that night had changed everything, not just for him but for both of them. The weeks that followed felt quieter but more meaningful. They were both trying in their own ways to heal the small cracks that had appeared in their relationship. The air between them no longer felt heavy like it once did, but there was still something fragile about it, something that required care. She noticed small changes in him first. He started to listen more when she spoke, really listen, not just wait for his turn to talk. When she came home from work, he asked how her day was and actually waited for her answer. Sometimes they'd cook dinner together and talk about simple things, the weather, the news, a funny commercial they'd seen. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. She found herself softening, too. She stopped holding on to the bitterness that had built up after that night. She realized that forgiveness wasn't about pretending nothing happened. It was about deciding that what happened wouldn't control her anymore. One Friday evening, after a long week, she came home to find candles on the dining table and a soft tune playing in the background. He stood by the counter with a nervous smile, holding 2 plates. "What's all this?" she asked, surprised. He shrugged. "Just thought I'd cook for us again. It's been a while since we had dinner without screens or distractions." Her heart warmed. It wasn't about the food or the candles. It was the effort that mattered. She smiled. "I like it," she said. "It feels peaceful." They sat down to eat, and the conversation flowed easily. He told her about a small project he'd started at work, how he was trying to improve himself, and how he'd been thinking about taking an evening course to learn something new. "I guess I just want to feel proud of myself again," he said quietly. She looked at him with kindness. "You should. Growth doesn't have to be big to be real. Every small step matters." He smiled faintly, looking down at his plate. "You always know how to say things that make me feel like I can do better." She laughed softly. "That's because you can." They ate, talked, and laughed a little, a sound she hadn't heard much from him lately. It reminded her of the early days of their relationship, when they used to laugh until their sides hurt over nothing at all. For the first time in a while, she saw a glimpse of that person again, the one who used to make her feel safe and understood. After dinner, they cleaned up together. He insisted on doing the dishes, telling her to sit down and relax. She watched him from the couch, smiling quietly. It wasn't that everything was perfect, but in that moment, it felt like they were finding their way back to something good. Later that night, as they sat on the porch looking at the stars, he turned to her and said, "You know, I've been thinking about that night. The restaurant, the argument, everything." She looked at him calmly, waiting for him to go on. He took a deep breath. "I was embarrassed that night, not because of you, but because of me. I let my pride speak louder than my love. When I saw you stay calm instead of yelling back, it made me realize how wrong I was. I saw how much strength you had." Her eyes softened. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "I wanted to shout, but something told me that staying calm was the only way to stop it from getting worse." He nodded slowly. "That's what amazed me the most. You didn't try to hurt me back. You just handled it with grace. I keep thinking about that moment, and it reminds me how lucky I am that you didn't walk away." She smiled faintly. "I thought about it honestly. But love doesn't just disappear because of one bad night. It hurts, but it also teaches." They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the soft rustle of the trees. It was a peaceful kind of silence, the kind that felt full rather than empty. A few days later, they were invited to a small get-together with friends. She wasn't sure if she wanted to go at first, but he encouraged her. "It'll be good for us," he said, "to get out, to be around people again." At the gathering, everything felt lighthearted. People laughed, shared stories, and talked about work, family, and weekend plans. She felt relaxed, but at one point, one of their friends brought up something that made her freeze for a moment. "I heard you two had a little argument at that restaurant downtown," the friend said with a teasing grin. "Word gets around, you know." The room went quiet for a second. Her husband looked uncomfortable, clearly embarrassed. But before the awkwardness could grow, she smiled and said calmly, "Yeah, it happened. Every couple argues sometimes. But what matters is what you do after." The friend laughed softly. "Fair enough. You two seem fine now anyway. She smiled again, glancing at her husband. We're better than fine. We learned something from it. He looked at her with gratitude in his eyes, not because she defended him, but because she handled it with the same calmness she had that night. When they got home later that evening, he said, "You always know how to make the hard moments easier." You didn't have to say it like that, but you did. She shrugged with a small smile. What's the point in holding on to what's already over? The only thing that matters is that we grew from it. He nodded, clearly touched by her words. I want to be more like that. More patient, more understanding. She looked at him with warmth. You already are. You've changed more than you realize, he chuckled softly. Guess I had a good teacher. Days turned into weeks and their home began to feel lighter again. They joked, shared meals, and even started planning small weekend trips together, something they hadn't done in a long time. One Saturday, they decided to go back to the same restaurant where everything had happened. He had suggested it, and she was hesitant at first, but he said gently, I want to replace that memory with a better one. When they walked in, she felt a familiar nervousness in her stomach. But as they sat down, she realized it wasn't fear, it was closure. The waiter, possibly recognizing them, gave a polite smile. Good to see you two again, he said. Her husband nodded. Good to be back. This time there was no tension. They ordered their food, talked about funny stories from work, and laughed about how strange life could be sometimes. When the bill came, he reached for it immediately, but she stopped him gently. Let's split it, she said with a smile. We're a team, remember? He paused, then smiled back. You're right. It was a small moment, but it felt huge, like everything had come full circle. As they left the restaurant, he turned to her and said, That night, when I threw my pride around, I thought I was being strong. But real strength is what you showed me. Staying calm, staying kind. You didn't just amaze me that night. You changed me. Her eyes softened. Then it was worth it, she said simply. They walked hand in hand through the parking lot, the cool evening air brushing against their faces. She looked up at the sky and felt something deep inside her. Not relief exactly, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when you realize a storm has finally passed. Later that night, as they sat together on the couch, he leaned his head on her shoulder and said quietly, Thank you for not giving up on me, she smiled and whispered. Thank you for learning from it. It wasn't a perfect love story, but it was a real one, full of flaws, mistakes, and forgiveness. The kind of story that shows how love isn't about never falling apart, but about finding your way back after you do. As they sat there in the soft glow of the lamp, she realized something important. Sometimes the most powerful reaction isn't loud or dramatic. It's calm, steady, and full of quiet strength. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything, because it already knows its worth. And in that moment, she understood why her reaction that night had amazed not just him, but herself too. Because even in the middle of pain and disappointment, she had chosen grace. And that choice had changed everything.